I'm thinking I'm going to call this video something along the lines of mindful noodling. Is that a good title for a video? I'm not sure. Maybe it's not. Maybe that will change. But I hope the concept behind this video is a good one. And it's all about being able to pick up the guitar and do something a bit more focused and creative rather than just reaching for your favourite riff or your favourite blues lick. And this kind of playing is obviously a good thing if you're playing for other people, whether it's friends or family or maybe some kind of guitar shop scenario. But beyond that, I think this is a really effective practice strategy. It's something that I do a lot. I think it's particularly effective if you don't have that much time to practice, and that's because by doing this you're exercising all of your musical muscles. You can be working on rhythm guitar, lead guitar, or a combination of those two things. It's a really good test of your fretboard knowledge and fluency. It forces you to think quickly and stay in the musical moment. So the basic idea here, which is a very simple one, is you're going to choose a key, you're going to choose a tempo, and then choose some kind of chord pattern. It could just be a single chord to start with. What I just played was based on a pair of chords. It could be a more complex chord progression. And then we're just going to make some music. And you can improvise, you can explore new ideas, you can work on getting certain concepts and ideas into your playing. And I suppose what sets this apart from just more regular kind of noodling is we have got this musical framework and structure in place. There's a key, there's a tempo, a chord progression. Perhaps there's going to be a groove of some kind as well, though it doesn't have to be a fixed groove with something like this. This can kind of evolve over time as you're playing. And when I do this exercise, I usually play it quite freely. So yeah, I'm trying to stay more or less in time, but that can be a little bit flexible. Sometimes I might slow down a little bit if I'm trying to get a particular idea together, and things might move around a little bit. But you could always try this with a metronome perhaps, or with some kind of drum machine backing. I think that might be a good idea. And this kind of thing can be as complex or as simple as you want to make it. That's why this exercise is so good. And the way you approach this is obviously going to depend on your current level of ability. I think for the purposes of this video, I'm going to try and keep things at a kind of medium, intermediate kind of a level. But if the kind of things I'm talking about are too complex, then you can obviously simplify. And if you want more advanced, more complex stuff, then you can always do that. And the most important thing is just to try and keep going, try and keep things musical. And yes, of course, you're going to make some mistakes and you're going to fumble over stuff, but it doesn't really matter. If you just keep on going, you'll develop your confidence and your fluency. Everyone makes mistakes on the guitar. I make tons of mistakes. I just edit them out of these videos. Don't tell anyone about that. Let's get specific then, and I'll talk about the way that I approach doing this kind of thing. And in the little improvisation that I just played, I was in the key of G, and it was all just based on a simple 2-chord pattern. It was quite a slow tempo, and I was just trying to explore some different things. So I had chord shapes in there, triads, some scale stuff, double stops, thirds, sixths. I think I had some spread triads in there towards the end. So there's almost no limit to the kind of things that you can cram into this exercise. And the chord pattern here was just G going to A minor. So if we're in the key of G, then G is the 1 chord, A minor is the 2 chord. So both of those chords are in the key. Very, very simple chord progression. And I began by just strumming the chords in a really, really simple way. And that's what I suggest you do, particularly if you're a beginner. You don't have to make this exercise too advanced to begin with. You can just work with the kind of materials that you already know. So even if it's just as simple as just going G, 2, 3, 4, A minor, 2, 3, 4, establishing these chords. Add a bit more rhythmic interest. Maybe arpeggiate the chords. If you know any embellishments, you can throw those in as well. So you've got your basic open chord shapes, but since we're in the key of G major, you can throw in any of the other notes in the key, so that the notes that belong to the key, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp and G. So you can kind of reach for those notes within the chord. If you're playing a G chord, got those little embellishments available to you. So if you play your G chord like this with 2 fingers, then I've got my first and second fingers free to add in some extra notes. Likewise with an A minor chord down in the open position. Lots of embellishments available to you. And then you might like to develop things further if you know some bar chord shapes or some other chord voicings a little bit higher up the neck. That's something to explore. So you've got G major bar chord here, A minor here, and if you know any of your other kind of caged shapes, they can be kind of fun to throw in as well. So I'm sure most of you will know your 5th string root bar chord shapes. You've got the G and the A minor there, but there are some other perhaps lesser used shapes which are quite nice. I think I used this one chord at some point, which is a G chord really in the D form, but I like to take the 3rd down into the bass. And you've got a G major with a B in the bass, G over B, which is an inversion of that G major chord. So we've got 7th fret, muting the 5th string, and then it's 5, 7, and 8. It's a really nice G major voicing, and that goes smoothly to A minor like that. And depending on where you're at in terms of your current level of musical ability, you might like to extend and embellish these chords a little bit further. So the basic chords are just G and A minor, but you can throw in some extensions. So you could make it G major 7 to A minor 7 perhaps, or throw in some ninths in there as well. So G major 9, A minor 9, and just explore different voicings. So so just some more kind of advanced, jazzier voicings in there. But the important thing here is just to keep the flow going. So just following that chord progression. It's still just 1 bar G, 1 bar A minor, trying to keep things in time and just exploring that simple chord pattern in various different ways. What about triads? I was playing quite a lot of triads in my little improvisation, and this kind of thing is a really good way of getting those triads into your playing in a musical way. Sometimes with triads they can just remain this kind of exercise that you do, but this way you're forced to actually make them musical. So you might like to start with just some simple triads, something like this. So just root position, G major, A minor. You could just start with that and create a little bit of rhythm. Arpeggiate the triads. It's not groundbreaking, but it's musical sounding. And then you can obviously explore some of the other inversions as well. So other string sets, so onto the top string set. One thing that's nice to do is to add extra notes into your triad shapes just to make things a little bit more colourful. For example, if I've just got this G major triad here, I can add in, just hunt along the top string of the triad shape to find other notes in the key. So we've got this A note, maybe this B note, it's a bit of a stretch, but a similar thing around this A minor triad shape. You can just find these little melodies within these triad shapes, and that's a really nice thing to do in a rhythm guitar context. I also very frequently use triads as a basis for single note improvisations, and that's something you can do here as well. So play some single note stuff, but trying to outline the chord changes, which in this case are G going to A minor, and throwing in some extra notes. One thing in particular that I like to do is to add in the second or the ninth to these triad shapes, which always sounds really cool. And there are really limitless possibilities here. So chords, triads, arpeggios, scales. I like to use double stops a lot, so thirds and sixths. And in my little playthrough earlier, I was doing that quite a lot. So thirds, for example, in the key of G, you can play them on the second and third strings perhaps. So you'd have this series of double stops which belongs to the key, and you can try and make some music with those shapes. I like to think out of chord shapes here, so I'm kind of coming out of this chord shape in the open position, coming out of this A minor shape, sixths are cool as well. It's exactly the same kind of idea. So coming out of chord shapes, I've discussed this many times in my videos, but coming out of a G chord shape, always a very cool sound. Getting into some more kind of single note things, you could try playing around with some scales. So G major scale is obviously going to work over both of the chords in this progression, or you could change scales with each chord. So you could play G major pentatonic, perhaps going to A minor pentatonic. And even if you're just playing single note improvisations, you still want to bear the framework of this exercise in mind. So playing in time, in tempo, and outlining the chord progression in terms of your note choice. They're just going between G major pentatonic and A minor pentatonic, and hopefully you were able to hear the chords going by even though I wasn't playing anything specifically chordal there. I think I played some longer arpeggio based ideas, so G major arpeggio going to an A minor arpeggio, very simple really. So the G major arpeggio, G, B and D, and you can lay out those notes in various different ways. I quite like these kind of diagonal arpeggio shapes. So G major to A minor, and there are lots of musical possibilities to be found within those arpeggio shapes, and you can always embellish those shapes, much like I would do with triad shapes, I can add in other notes from the key. Once again, the second or the ninth is a good one to add, and it tends to make these simple major and minor arpeggio sound a little bit cooler. So I hope you're starting to see how this exercise might work for you. Apologies if I'm cramming too much information into this video. I realise I'm throwing around a lot of different ideas, but I think that's because this exercise is so open-ended. It can be whatever you want it to be. So whatever you're currently working on, you can get it into this kind of exercise. And more advanced things perhaps might be to get into some spread triads. I think I threw in a few of those earlier on. So for the G major, you've got these kind of shapes. And then for A minor, so very beautiful sounding, and you can just play around with those in exactly the same way. And I want you to make this exercise your own. There are so many different variables here. This is really just a starting point. So if you're a beginner, or more or less an absolute beginner, you might just like to stick on one chord, and you could literally just play a cowboy chord or a bar chord and just try and play in time. So find some different strumming patterns or rhythms, maybe arpeggiate the chord shape, and that might be enough. Then as you go beyond beginner stages, you can make things more complex. As I've just shown you, you can try different chord voicings elsewhere on the neck. You can develop into triads, scales, arpeggios, all kinds of different options. And obviously you can do this in any key. You can start with just a single chord or a pair of chords. I think it's good to keep things quite simple to start with, just so you can get things flowing. But if you are more of an advanced player, then throw in more of a chord progression. It could be a more complex chord progression. You could have some non-diatonic stuff in there as well, more of a jazzy kind of a chord progression perhaps. But the basic exercise will always work in the same way. You've got some chords, you've got a tempo, and you're just trying to keep some kind of musical flow going. And that's it for this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I really hope you have a go and try out some of the ideas that I've been discussing. And I just want to stress once again that this exercise can really be whatever you want it to be, and you can adapt it to suit your musical tastes and your current level of musical ability. So good luck with that. If you would like tab, that is of course going to be up on the Patreon page, and I'm going to write out the little mindful noodle that I played at the start of this video, and also some of the other ideas that I've been discussing. Grab that on the Patreon page should you wish, and I'll see you next time.